The moon hung low over the whispering woods, its silver light fracturing through the canopy like shattered glass, casting elongated shadows that danced with the rustle of unseen leaves. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wild herbs, mingled with the faint metallic tang of blood from some distant hunt. Elara knelt by the edge of a crumbling stone well, her fingers tracing the moss-covered rim, the cold seeping into her bones like an old betrayal. Her breath came in shallow wisps, visible in the chill night, each exhale a silent plea to the indifferent stars. She was no stranger to solitude. It had been her shadow since the day the pack's healers had proclaimed her barren, a curse whispered in the halls of the Alpha's keep. Infertile, they had said, their voices laced with pity that cut deeper than any claw. In a world where bloodlines were the threads weaving the fate of clans, her womb's emptiness was a death sentence, not of the body, but of belonging. Exiled to the fringes of the territory, she scavenged the woods like a ghost, her once vibrant fur now dulled by hunger and despair. The pack's howls echoed from the distant hills, a chorus of unity she could no longer join, each note twisting the knife in her chest. Elara's eyes, the color of storm clouds, lifted to the treetops where fireflies flickered like lost souls. She remembered the night of her declaration, the grand hall alive with the flicker of torchlight and the heavy aroma of roasted venison. Alpha Thorn, the king of their shadowed realm, had presided over the ceremony, his presence a storm unto itself, broad shoulders cloaked in midnight fur, eyes glowing with the feral gold of unchallenged power. He had not looked at her then, not truly. She was just another Omega, a vessel deemed unworthy. But in her dreams his gaze lingered, a phantom touch that stirred something wild within her. A heat she dared not name. A twig snapped behind her, sharp as a bone breaking. Elara froze, her heart pounding against her ribs like a caged beast. The woods were alive with dangers, rogue shifters prowling for the weak, ancient spirits that fed on forgotten sorrows, and worse, the enforcers of the pack sent to ensure exiles like her never returned. She pressed her palm to the earth, feeling the pulse of the roots beneath, drawing strength from the wild heart of the forest. Slowly she rose, her lithe form silhouetted against the moon's glow, ears straining for the source of the sound. Nothing. Only the wind sighing through the branches, carrying the faint echo of a wolf's distant call. Relief washed over her, mingled with the ever-present ache of isolation. She turned back to the well, dipping her hand into the inky water, letting its chill numb the calluses on her skin. Water had always been her solace, a mirror to her fractured soul. In its depths, she saw not the woman she was, a shifter stripped of her pack, her purpose, but the girl who once dreamed of litters tumbling at her feet, of a mate whose bond would mend the world's cruelties. But dreams were luxuries for the fertile, the favored. Elara's hand emerged dripping, and she wiped it across her face, tasting salt that was not from the well. The infertility wasn't just a barrenness of body, it hollowed her spirit, leaving echoes where laughter should be. She had tried the old rituals, herbs brewed under the blood moon, incantations to the moon goddess, whispered in forgotten tongues. But the goddess remained silent, her light mocking from above. As the night deepened, Elara gathered her meager belongings, a tattered cloak woven from nettles, a satchel of foraged roots, and a small amulet carved from moonstone, its surface etched with runes of protection. It had been her mother's, passed down before the fever claimed her, a talisman against the darkness that now seemed to seep from every shadow. She slung it over her shoulder and ventured deeper into the woods, the path narrowing to a ribbon of dirt flanked by thorns that snagged at her hem like desperate fingers. The air grew heavier, laced with the musk of predators. Elara's senses sharpened, her shifter blood humming beneath her skin, urging the change she suppressed. To shift now, in her weakened state, would drain her further. But the instinct was a siren's call, fur rippling, claws extending, the raw power of the beast offering temporary escape from human frailty. She resisted, focusing instead on the crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant hoot of an owl that sounded like a warning. Hours blurred into a trance of movement, the woods unfolding like a labyrinth of secrets. She paused at a clearing where ancient oaks stood sentinel, their bark scarred by claws from battles long past. In the center lay a stone altar, overgrown with vines, a relic from the time when the Pax revered the wild gods. Elara approached, her fingers brushing the cool surface, feeling the faint thrum of old magic. Here she had come before, spilling her blood in offering, begging for a miracle that never came. Tonight, as she knelt, a strange warmth bloomed in her core. Not the fire of the shift, but something deeper, like roots stirring in frozen soil. She gasped, clutching her abdomen, the sensation foreign and terrifying. Pain lanced through her, sharp as birthing pangs, though she knew it impossible. Sweat beaded on her brow, mixing with the dew-kissed air. Visions flickered at the edges of her sight, three small forms, wriggling with life, their cries piercing the veil between worlds. No, it was a cruel illusion, born of desperation. Elara shook her head, rising unsteadily, but the warmth lingered. A promise or a curse she couldn't decipher. The moon watched impassively as she stumbled onward, the woods closing around her like a shroud. Unbeknownst to her, far beyond the tree line, golden eyes tracked her path. Alpha thorn, drawn by a scent that defied the healer's words. A pull as ancient as the stars. The king of beasts had found his enigma, and with her, the unraveling of fates long decreed. But for now, Elara pressed on alone, the night's embrace both cage and cradle, whispering of trials yet to come. The wind carried her scent deeper into the unknown, where destiny waited with teeth and tenderness intertwined. The mist clung to Elara's skin, like a lover's regret, heavy and unyielding as she pushed through the underbrush. The forest's heart pulsing with secrets older than the packs themselves. Dawn's first blush painted the leaves in hues of bruised purple, but the light offered no warmth, only a pale reminder that the night had not fully released its grip. Her steps faltered, each one echoing the throb in her belly, an insistent rhythm that mocked the healer's verdict, stirring visions she dared not trust. The warmth from the altar had ebbed into a dull ache, like embers buried under ash, promising life where none should bloom. She collapsed against a gnarled oak, its bark rough and unyielding against her back. The scent of resin sharp in her nostrils, mingling with the sour tang of her own sweat, her hand pressed instinctively to her abdomen, fingers splaying over the taut fabric of her tunic, feeling the subtle shift beneath, like whispers of movement, too faint to be real yet too vivid to dismiss. Triplets. The word clawed at her mind, unbidden, conjuring images of tiny paws and milky breaths. A family forged from impossibility. But how? The moon goddess had turned her face away. The rituals had yielded only silence and scorn. Was this a trick of the wilds? Some spirit's cruel jest to lure her deeper into despair? Elara's breath hitched, ragged in the still air, as a low growl rumbled from the shadows ahead. Her head snapped up, senses flaring, the earthy musk of wolf laced with something regal, commanding. Not a rogue. This was pack, pure and potent, the kind that bent lesser beasts to its will. She froze, heart slamming against her ribs, the amulet at her throat humming faintly, its moonstone cool against her fevered skin. The enforcers, they must have caught her trail, drawn by the faint blood she'd spilled at the altar. Exile meant death if she strayed too close to the borders, her scent a beacon for those who enforced the Alpha's decree. The undergrowth parted with a rustle like tearing silk, and a massive form emerged, not the brutish enforcer she feared, but a lone scout, his fur a mottled grey under the dappled light, eyes gleaming with wary intelligence. He shifted mid-stride, bones cracking like dry branches, until a man stood before her, tall, scarred across his chest, his face etched with the lines of too many border skirmishes. "Omega," he snarled, voice gravel-rough, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. "You've wandered far. The Alpha's lands end here. Turn back or we'll drag you to the pits." Elara rose slowly, her legs trembling not from fear alone, but from the storm brewing within. The warmth in her core flared again, a protective surge that made her spine straighten, her storm-grey eyes locking onto his. "I seek no trouble," she murmured, her voice steady despite the lie. Trouble had found her, nested in her blood. "The woods claim their own. Let me pass." He laughed, a bitter bark that echoed through the trees, stepping closer until she could smell the iron of old wounds on him. "Pass. You're marked, Barren One. The pack remembers. Alpha Thorn's word is law. Exiles fade into the mist, forgotten." His gaze dropped to her hand on her belly, narrowing. "What's this? Hiding something? Or just the madness of the alone?" The accusation struck like a claw, reopening wounds she'd thought scarred over. Elara's vision blurred, not with tears, but with a haze of instinct, her shifter blood singing, urging the change to defend what might not even exist. She felt it then, clearer, a flutter. 3 distinct pulses, like stars igniting in the void. Not madness, miracle, or malediction. The scout lunged, hand outstretched to seize her arm, but she twisted away, thorns snagging her cloak as she bolted into the thicker woods. Branches whipped her face, drawing thin lines of blood that burned like accusations, the forest alive with pursuit. His howls shattered the morning calm, calling others, the pack's net tightening. Elara's lungs burned, each breath a rasp of damp air and desperation, the ground uneven beneath her feet, roots snaking like traps. She couldn't shift. The energy would sap her, endanger whatever stirred inside. Instead, she drew on the wild's pulse, weaving through the trees with a grace born of survival, the amulet bouncing against her chest like a second heartbeat. Deeper in, where the ancient groves twisted into labyrinths, she found a hollow beneath a fallen giant, its trunk split by lightning long ago, exposing heartwood dark and fragrant with decay. She crawled inside, curling into the fetid earth, mud caking her skin, the scent of rot a camouflage against her own. The scout's snarls grew distant, then silent, replaced by the drip of water from unseen leaves and the skitter of hidden creatures. Safe, for now. But the isolation pressed in, heavier than the mist, her body a vessel of unknowns. As the sun climbed higher, filtering golden shafts through the canopy, Elara closed her eyes, letting the forest's symphony lull her, birds trilling like forgotten lullabies, wind sighing through hollows. In the quiet, the sensations sharpened. Not just warmth, but a bond, ethereal threads linking her to the lives within. Triplets, pups, her pups. The realization crashed over her like a wave, joy tangled with terror. How could she protect them alone, a barren exile with no pack, no mate? The healer's words echoed, a curse unbroken, yet here was defiance, raw and pulsing. Far off, a deeper howl rose, not the scouts, but something primal, resonant, shaking the leaves from their perches. Alpha Thorn. She felt it in her bones, a pull like gravity, his golden gaze piercing the miles between them. He had scented her, or perhaps the impossible life she carried, drawn by the moon goddess's whim or his own unspoken hunger. Elara's hand traced her belly, feeling the faint kicks, each one a spark of hope amid the shadows. But hope in this world was a double-edged blade, cutting deep before it healed. She emerged as twilight bled into the sky, the woods now a tapestry of indigo and silver, fireflies igniting like errant stars. The path ahead forked, one toward the human villages, where outcasts scraped by in secrecy, the other deeper into the forbidden wilds, where ancient pacts slumbered and monsters wore familiar faces. Elara chose the wilds, her step surer now, driven by the tiny heartbeats echoing her own. The alpha's howl followed, a promise of collision, where fates would tangle in blood and longing. In the gathering dusk, she whispered to the wind, "If this is my curse-lifted goddess, guide me through the storm." The air carried no answer, only the rustle of leaves and the distant thunder of paws on the hunt. Elara pressed on, her silhouette merging with the trees, a mother forged in exile, carrying the weight of miracles yet to be born. The night enveloped her, tender and treacherous. As destiny's jaws parted wide, the wilds swallowed Elara whole, their embrace a tangle of thorns and whispers, the ground soft with the decay of fallen empires long overgrown. Night's velvet cloak draped the ancient trees, their branches arching like the ribs of some colossal beast, filtering moonlight into silvery veins that traced paths of shadow and revelation. The air hummed with the low thrum of insects, a chorus laced with the distant cries of nocturnal hunters, while the scent of blooming nightshade, sweet and poisonous, clung to her skin, mirroring the fragile hope blooming within her. Each step pulled at her muscles, a weary rhythm that echoed the tiny flutters in her belly, 3 insistent sparks defying the void the pack had carved into her soul. She moved like a spectre through the forbidden groves, where the veil between worlds thinned, and the moon goddess's forgotten kin stirred in the underbelly of the earth. The path she chose wound deeper, away from the ordered borders of the packlands, into realms where shifters whispered of the elder wilds, places of raw magic, where curses twisted into boons, and the fertile earth birthed monstrosities from sorrow. Elara's hand never strayed far from her abdomen, fingers pressing gently as if to anchor the impossible lives against the storm she sensed brewing. The warmth there had steadied into a quiet fire, not the agony of before, but a steady glow that chased the chill from her veins, whispering of bonds forged in secrecy. Memories clawed at her as she crested a ridge, the wind whipping her cloak like accusatory flags. She saw the pack's heart again in her mind's eye, the great hall under full moon, flames leaping in the hearth to cast flickering shadows on fur-draped walls, the air thick with the musk of dominance and roasted meats. Alpha Thorn had stood at the dais, his form a monolith of power, midnight fur rippling over corded muscles, his golden eyes scanning the assembly with the weight of a king who bent fates to his will. When the healers had stepped forward, their voices trembling with ritual gravity, proclaiming her barren, a omega unfit for the bloodline's continuation, his silence had been the cruelest cut. No glance of pity, no word of mercy. Just the indifferent turn of his head, sealing her exile as surely as any chain. That indifference haunted her now, a thorn deeper than the brambles snagging her hem. How could the goddess gift her this miracle, only to dangle it before the one who had cast her out? The flutters responded to her turmoil, a trio of kicks like tiny protests, urging her onward. Elara paused at the edge of a ravine, its depths shrouded in mist that rose like exhaled breaths from the abyss below. The water far down rushed with a roar that vibrated through her bones, carrying the mineral tang of underground springs and the faint, acrid bite of sulphur, omens of the wild's unrest. She leaned against a twisted pine, its needles sharp as regrets, and let the tears come, hot and silent, tracing paths down her dirt-streaked cheeks. In the quiet, a vision unfurled, unbidden, not memory but something otherworldly, pulled from the ether by the amulet's subtle pulse against her chest. She saw Thorn not as the distant king, but close, his breath warm on her neck, golden eyes softening with a hunger that mirrored her own buried desires. His hand, calloused from battles, cupping her belly, feeling the lives she carried, a bond snapping into place like the first crack of thunder. Love impossible, the seers would call it, an omega and her alpha, divided by decree and destiny. Yet in the vision, his touch was tenderness amid the storm, a promise of protection laced with the ferocity of claim. Elara gasped, the image shattering as a real rumble echoed from the ravine, a growl, deep and resonant, shaking loose pebbles that skittered like fleeing thoughts. Her heart seized, shifter instincts flaring as she scented the air. Wolf, but twisted, laced with the rot of something cursed. Not pack enforcers, but a rogue, one of the Forsaken who roamed these depths, warped by the wild's magic into half-beast, half-nightmare. Eyes like embers gleamed from the mist below, fixed on her with predatory gleam. "Lost lamb!" it rasped, voice a guttural scrape, as claws scraped against stone, propelling a hulking form up the ravine's side. Fur matted with filth, limbs elongated unnaturally. It was a mockery of their kind, driven mad by isolation and the elder wild's touch. Elara backed away, the pine's bark biting into her palms, the flutters in her belly turning frantic as if sensing the threat. She couldn't run. The ravine hemmed her in, and shifting would risk the fragile lives within. Instead, she drew on the amulet's power, its moonstone warming like a captured star, channeling the goddess's faint echo. "Stay back," she commanded, her voice steady, laced with the authority of impending motherhood, a queen in exile. The rogue paused, head tilting, nostrils flaring at her scent. Not just omega, but fertile, blooming with life. Envy twisted its snarl into something feral, a howl splitting the night as it lunged. Time fractured. Elara dodged, the beast's claws raking the air where her throat had been, the wind of it whipping her hair. She countered, with a surge of wild magic, the amulet flaring bright, vines erupting from the earth like serpents to ensnare its legs. Thorns pierced hide, drawing black ichor that sizzled on the ground, the scent of burned flesh mingling with the ravine's damp. The rogue thrashed, breaking free with a roar that shook the trees, but Elara was already moving, scrambling along the ridge, her body a vessel of adrenaline and ancient will. Pain lanced her side as a glancing blow caught her. A shallow gash, warm blood seeping through her tunic, the metallic taste flooding her mouth from bitten lip. She tumbled into a thicket, thorns tearing at her skin like jealous lovers, the world spinning in a haze of green and shadow. The rogue's pursuit faltered at the thicket's edge, its form silhouetted against the moon, but another sound cut through. A howl, pure and commanding, echoing from the packlands. Thorn. Closer now, his presence a tidal pull, scenting her blood on the wind. Curled in the undergrowth, Elara clutched her belly, the flutters calming to a protective hush, as if the pups sensed rescue or ruin approaching. The rogue slunk back into the mist, cowed by the alpha's distant call. But the damage lingered, blood loss sapping her strength, the wound a burning reminder of her vulnerability. Yet in the pain, clarity bloomed. She was no longer just the barren exile. She carried the future, a defiance that could shatter thrones or forge new pacts. The vision's tenderness warred with fear. Would Thorn see her as queen or threat? As the first hints of false dawn grayed the sky, Elara rose, binding her wound with strips from her cloak, the fabric stiff with her blood's sticky warmth. The wild stretched onward, a labyrinth of peril and promise, but she pressed into them, drawn inexorably toward collision. The alpha's howl faded into the ether, a siren's lure, while the tiny heartbeats within her drummed a counterpoint. Survival, sacrifice, the raw poetry of rebirth. In the hush before the storm, Elara whispered to her unseen children, "We endure," her voice a thread of light in the encroaching dark. The path twisted ahead, veined with destiny's unyielding roots. The false dawn's pallor seeped through the canopy like diluted milk, casting the wilds in a ghostly haze where shadows lingered like unspoken regrets. Elara's wound throbbed with each heartbeat, a hot pulse beneath the makeshift bandage, the scent of her own blood mingling with the loamy earth and the faint, acrid residue of the rogue's ichor. She staggered forward, the thicket's thorns relinquishing their hold with reluctant scratches, each one a tiny echo of the larger battles etched into her flesh. The air hung heavy with the promise of rain, droplets gathering on leaves overhead, poised to fall like tears the sky could no longer contain. Her hand cradled her belly, where the triplets stirred restlessly, their movements a defiant rhythm against the encroaching exhaustion that clawed at her limbs. Deeper into the elder wilds she ventured, the trees growing ancient and sentinel-like, their trunks twisted into shapes that whispered of forgotten pacts, gnarled faces frozen in eternal howls, branches reaching like pleading arms. The ground softened underfoot, carpeted in moss that cushioned her steps but clung to her wounds like a possessive shroud, its cool dampness seeping through the fabric to soothe and sting in equal measure. Elara's breath came in measured gasps, the metallic tang of blood on her tongue a constant companion, sharpening her senses to the symphony of the forest. The rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth, the distant trickle of a hidden stream, and beneath it all, the low hum of magic, raw and untamed, vibrating through the roots like the goddess's buried heartbeat. She paused at the edge of a glade, encircled by standing stones, weathered to smoothness by centuries of wind and rain, their surfaces etched with runes that glowed faintly in the half-light, pulsing in time with her own inner fire. This was a nexus, a place where the veil thinned further, and the air shimmered with ethereal wisps, spirits of the wild, drawn to the life she carried like moths to a forbidden flame. Elara sank to her knees in the center, the grass yielding soft and fragrant, releasing bursts of wild thyme that filled her nostrils with its herbal bite. Her fingers traced the nearest stone, feeling the cool vibration travel up her arm, resonating with the amulet at her throat, now warm as a living ember. Visions flickered again, unbidden. Thorn's golden eyes locking onto hers across a battlefield of fate, his massive form shifting seamlessly between man and beast, a growl of possession that was both threat and vow. The impossible love gnawed at her, a ache deeper than the gash in her side. He had cast her out, his silence a blade that severed her from the pack's warmth, yet now his howl echoed in her blood, pulling her toward him like an iron tether. Was it destiny's cruel jest to bind her to the one who deemed her worthless? The triplets kicked in response, a trio of protests that grounded her, reminding her of the sacrifice already made, their existence a rebellion against the healer's decree, a power she alone wielded in this forsaken place. Solitude wrapped around her like the mist, heavy yet strangely empowering, the glade's isolation a cradle for her introspection. Here, away from the pack's judgments, she could almost believe in redemption, in a rinascimento where barrenness bloomed into legacy. But the wilds offered no such illusions for long. A tremor shook the earth, subtle at first, like the distant footfalls of a storm, then building to a rumble that set the stones humming in discord. Elara's head snapped up, her storm-grey eyes scanning the tree line, where shadows coalesced into forms, rogues, not one, but a pack of them, warped by the elder magic into hulking abominations with elongated limbs and eyes burning like coals in the gloom. Their scents assaulted her, rot and rage, mingled with the feral hunger of the outcast, drawn by the rogue's earlier howl and the irresistible allure of her fertile essence. The leader, larger than the rest, its fur patchy and scarred, lowered its head, fangs glinting in the dim light, a guttural snarl vibrating through the air like tearing velvet. Panic surged, but Elara quelled it, drawing on the glade's power. The amulet flared, its light spilling across the stones, awakening the runes in a cascade of silver glow. Vines erupted from the soil once more, thicker now, coiling like serpents to lash at the encroaching beasts. One rogue lunged, claws raking the air, its breath hot and foul as it snapped at her throat. She rolled aside, the grass slick beneath her, pain exploding in her wounded side as she scrambled to her feet. The impact jarred the triplets, their flutters turning to frantic thuds, a chorus of fear that fueled her resolve. "Not today," she whispered, voice raw, channeling the magic through her veins, the wild's gift to the mother in peril. The battle unfolded in a blur of fury and finesse. Elara darted between the stones, using their hum to amplify her defenses, roots bursting forth to trip and bind, thorns drawing dark blood that sizzled on the earth. A rogue's paw caught her shoulder, tearing fabric and flesh, the burn of it like fire licking her bones, but she countered with a surge of power, the amulet's light blinding the beast as vines crushed its windpipe in a wet snap. The air thickened with the coppery reek of violence, mingled with the ozone tang of unleashed magic, her breaths coming in labored bursts, sweat stinging her eyes. One by one the rogues fell, their bodies twisting in death throes that shook the glade, but not without cost. Her wounds wept freely now, strength ebbing like the retreating mist. As the last rogue slumped, its ember eyes dimming to ash, Elara collapsed against a stone, the world tilting in a haze of pain and triumph. The glade fell silent, save for the drip of rain finally breaking free from the leaves, pattering on her skin like a baptism. The triplets quieted, as if sensing the peril past, their presence a balm amid the carnage. But victory was fleeting. The rogue's howls would draw more and worse, the pack's enforcers or Thorn himself, his scent growing stronger on the wind, a regal musk cutting through the blood and decay. In that fragile peace, Elara's mind turned inward, the solitude cracking open to reveal the power she had always possessed, not in fertility alone, but in endurance. Sacrifice had scarred her, but it also forged her, each drop of blood a seal on her destiny. The rain washed her face, cool and cleansing, carrying away the grime of battle. While far off, the Alpha's howl rose again, closer, insistent, a collision inevitable. She rose unsteadily, the glade's magic lingering in her like a second skin, and pressed onward through the downpour, the wild's heart beating in sync with her own. Hope flickered amid the melancholia, a tender violence promising that from death's embrace, life would claw its way free. The path ahead twisted into uncertainty, veined with the threads of impossible bonds, as Mother and Miracles ventured toward the storm's eye. The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the elder wilds into a labyrinth of mirrors, puddles reflecting the fractured sky, where storm clouds churned like the turmoil in Elara's soul. Each drop struck her skin like an accusation, cold and piercing, mingling with the warm trickle of blood from her fresh wounds, the metallic scent rising sharp against the petrichor of soaked earth. Her cloak hung heavy, sodden and torn, clinging to her frame like the weight of secrets too long carried. The triplets within her shifted uneasily, their flutters a muffled protest against the downpour's fury, as if sensing the convergence of fates drawing nearer with every labored step. She pressed through the deluge, the ancient trees looming as silent witnesses, their leaves shedding water in cascades that blurred the line between sky and soil. The glade's magic lingered in her veins, a faint silver thread weaving through the pain, bolstering her against the exhaustion that gnawed at her bones. But the wilds were unforgiving, their paths twisting into deceptive snares, roots slick with mud that threatened to swallow her whole, vines that whipped like vengeful spirits in the wind. Elara's breath came in ragged bursts, fogging the air before her storm-grey eyes, each inhale laced with the ozone bite of lightning and the distant, primal musk of pursuit. The Alpha's howl had not faded. It echoed now in her blood, a resonant pull that tugged at her core, intertwining with the triplets' heartbeats like an unbreakable knot. Impossible love, the visions had taunted. Thorn, the king who had condemned her, now haunting her steps with the ferocity of destiny. She crested another ridge, the ground sloping into a misty hollow where bioluminescent fungi clung to fallen logs, casting an eerie, ethereal glow that danced across the rain-slicked stones. The air hummed here, thicker with the wild's essence, carrying whispers of ancient oaths broken and reformed. Elara paused, hand splayed over her belly, feeling the warmth there defy the chill. A beacon amid the storm, promising power she was only beginning to grasp. But peace shattered like fragile ice. From the tree line emerged shadows, not the warped rogues of before, but enforcers, 3 of them, their forms shifting fluidly between man and wolf, fur matted by rain, eyes gleaming with the cold precision of duty. Their sense hit her first, pack loyalty, iron resolve, and the faint undercurrent of fear masked as righteousness. The leader, a burly beta with scars crisscrossing his muzzle even in human form, stepped forward, water streaming from his broad shoulders, his voice a low thunder. "Exile," he growled, the word dripping with contempt. "You've strayed into forbidden depths. The Alpha's decree is clear. Barren ones do not return. And now you reek of blood and something unnatural." Elara's spine straightened, the amulet pulsing hot against her chest, its light flickering through the rain like a defiant star. The enforcers circled, their boots squelching in the mud, claws half extended, ready to rend. She backed toward the hollow's center, where a weathered obelisk rose from the earth, another relic of the Elder Pacts, its surface veined with glowing runes that responded to her presence, humming in harmony with the lives she guarded. "Unnatural," she echoed, her voice steady, laced with the quiet authority blooming from her sacrifice. The rain plastered her hair to her face, but she met their gazes unflinching, the triplets' kicks fueling a surge of protective fury. "The goddess has spoken where your healers failed. I carry the future, triplets, born of the wild's will. Harm me, and you invite her wrath." Laughter barked from the beta, harsh and disbelieving, as he shifted partially, fangs bared in the downpour. Lies from a desperate omega. "The pack hunts you for sport now, your scent drawing the unworthy like flies to decay. Alpha Thorn will end this farce himself." His words struck deeper than any claw, reopening the wound of rejection, the grand hall's silence. Thorn's golden eyes averted as her world crumbled, yet even as fear coiled in her gut, the pull intensified, a golden thread yanking taut, drawing him closer through the storm. The enforcers lunged as one, a coordinated storm of muscle and malice. Elara dodged the beta's swipe, her wounded side screaming in protest, the rain turning the ground treacherous. She channeled the obelisk's power, the runes flaring bright, sending arcs of silver energy crackling through the air, bolts that singed fur and elicited yowls of pain. One enforcer crumpled, vines from the earth coiling around his throat like nooses woven from moonlight, squeezing until his struggles ceased in a gurgle drowned by the rain. The second barreled toward her, jaws snapping, but she met him with a burst of raw magic. Her palm slamming against his chest, the amulet's glow channeling a shock that hurled him back into the underbrush, bones cracking against unyielding bark. The beta closed in, relentless, his claws raking her arm in a shallow gash that burned like liquid fire, blood blooming dark against her skin. Pain blurred her vision, but Elara twisted, using the momentum to drive her elbow into his ribs, the impact jarring through her like thunder. The triplets thrashed within, their fear a mirror to her own, but it ignited something primal, a mother's roar building in her throat. She tapped deeper into the wilds, the hollow awakening fully now, the ground trembling as roots erupted like spears, impaling the beta's leg and pinning him in the mud. He snarled, thrashing, rain mixing with his blood to form rivulets of crimson that snaked toward the obelisk, absorbed into its glowing base like an offering. Panting, Elara stood over him, the storm raging around her, lightning illuminating the hollow in stark flashes. "Tell Thorn," she gasped, voice raw with exertion and unspoken longing, "that the barren one bears his legacy. The goddess defies your laws." The beta's eyes widened, not just in pain, but dawning horror as her scent. Fertile, potent, laced with the alpha's own echo from the visions, registered fully. He slumped, defeated, as the roots tightened, silencing his protests. The rain eased to a drizzle, the hollow falling into a hushed reverence, the obelisk's light dimming to a soft pulse that mirrored her weary heartbeats. Elara's body trembled, wounds weeping, but victory carved a new resolve into her soul, solitude yielding to strength, sacrifice forging the queen she was meant to be. She bound her new injuries with trembling fingers, the fabric stiff and cold, tasting victory bitter on her tongue amid the coppery flood. Yet as she gathered herself, a deeper howl pierced the fading storm, not the enforcers. But thorns so close now it vibrated through the earth, shaking loose leaves that fluttered down like omens. His scent crested the ridge, regal and intoxicating, cutting through the rain's cleanse, a promise of confrontation where impossible love would clash with decreed fates. Elara's hand rested on her belly, feeling the triplet settle into a steady rhythm, as if bracing for the storm's true eye. In the dripping silence, she whispered to the wilds, "Let it come," her voice a thread of hope woven through the melancholia. The path ahead gleamed with peril and possibility, destiny's jaws closing, tender and fierce, on the rebirth awaiting. The storm's remnants dripped from the leaves like lingering doubts, the air thick with the scent of wet fur and scorched earth from the obelisk's fading glow. Elara leaned against the ancient stone, its runes now dim embers pulsing faintly against her palm, a cool anchor amid the fire in her veins. Blood seeped from her wounds, warm rivulets tracing paths down her arm and side, mingling with the rain's chill to form a sticky film that clung to her skin like unspoken accusations. The triplets within her had quieted to a soft, insistent thrum, their presence a fragile shield against the exhaustion threatening to pull her under. She tasted salt and iron on her lips, the beta enforcer's defeated form slumped nearby, a grim testament to her defiance, his labored breaths the only sound breaking the hollow's hush. But the wilds held their breath, the very roots beneath her feet vibrating with an approaching thunder, not of weather, but of power unchained. Thorn's howl crested the ridge like a breaking wave, raw and resonant, shaking the droplets from the branches in a shimmering cascade. His scent flooded the air first, musk and midnight pine, laced with the feral edge of a king on the hunt, cutting through the petrichor and blood like a blade through silk. Elara's heart stuttered, the pull in her core tightening to a vice, drawing her upright despite the protest of torn muscles. The impossible bond from her visions surged, a golden thread igniting her blood, warring with the scars of rejection. The grand hall's silence, his averted gaze sealing her fate as barren exile. He emerged from the tree line like a shadow-given form, massive even in half-shift, midnight fur rippling over broad shoulders, golden eyes blazing through the mist. Rain glistened on his pelt, each drop catching the first hesitant light of true dawn creeping over the horizon, painting him in hues of silver and fire. Thorn's nostrils flared, taking in the carnage, the bound enforcer, the scorched earth, and her, standing bloodied but unbowed, the amulet at her throat glowing softly in recognition. He shifted fully to man, bones realigning with a series of deep cracks that echoed like thunder's echo, revealing the sculpted lines of his body, scars from ancient battles etching stories across his chest. His gaze locked onto hers, storm-grey meeting gold, and for a moment the world narrowed to that connection, a chasm bridged by destiny's cruel hand. "Elara," he growled, voice a low rumble that vibrated through the ground, laced with something raw, unguarded. He stepped forward, boots sinking into the mud, but halted at the obelisk's edge, as if the runes themselves warned of the precipice between them. The air crackled with tension, the scent of his proximity, warm, commanding, stirring the heat in her belly, mingling fear with an ache she had buried deep. The pack whispered of your trail, but this... His eyes dropped to the blood staining her tunic, then to her hand cradling her abdomen, nostrils flaring as her scent registered fully. Not just Omega, not just exile, but fertile, blooming with life that carried his echo, woven by the goddess's whim. She straightened, pain lancing her side like a fresh claw, but she met his stare without flinching, the triplet's flutters urging her on, a chorus of tiny heartbeats syncing with the wild's pulse. "Alpha," she said, her voice steady, threaded with the quiet fury of survival. "You come to enforce the decree? The barren one returned from the shadows." The words tasted bitter, reopening the wound of that night, the healer's proclamation hanging between them like a spectre. Solitude had forged her here, in the elder wild's embrace, but now it cracked under the weight of his presence, sacrifice demanding its due. Thorn's jaw tightened, golden eyes flickering with conflict, regret, hunger. He closed the distance in 2 strides, his hand reaching out, hovering near her cheek before dropping to her belly, palm pressing gently, reverently. The touch ignited everything, warmth flooding her core, the bond snapping taut like a bowstring released. He felt them, the triplets, their movements stirring under his fingers, 3 sparks of life defying the fates he had upheld. A low rumble built in his chest, not growl but wonder, his breath hitching as the truth sank in. "Impossible," he murmured, voice rough with emotion, eyes lifting to hers, stripped of the king's mask. "The healers. I believed them. Cast you out to protect the bloodline, but this, you carry my legacy hidden by the goddess's hand." Tears blurred her vision, hot against the cooling rain. As the vision's tenderness became real, his touch a balm on scars both seen and unseen. But joy tangled with rage, the impossible love a double-edged blade. "Protected," she whispered, voice breaking, hand covering his, feeling the calluses that spoke of battles fought alone. "You silenced me, Thorn, left me to the wild's mercy, while I bled offerings to a deaf moon. These pups, they are mine, born of pain and power you denied." The obelisk hummed, runes flaring as if in judgment, the air thickening with the wild's magic, vines stirring at their feet like witnesses to the reckoning. He pulled her close, enveloping her in his warmth, the scent of him, earth and storm, drowning the blood and decay. "I was blind," he confessed, forehead pressing to hers. Golden eyes shimmering with unshed tears, a king's vulnerability laid bare. "The pull haunted me since your exile, a void in my soul. Now I see, you are no barren Omega, but the queen the pack needs, the heart I lost." His lips brushed her temple, tender amid the violence of their paths, but Elara felt the cost, the enforcer stirring weakly, the wild shadows whispering of challenges yet to come. She had lost her isolation, her unyielding solitude, to claim this bond, a sacrifice of the self-forged exile for the vulnerability of union. Lightning cracked overhead, the first rays of dawn piercing the clouds, gilding the hollow in gold. Thorn lifted her effortlessly, cradling her against his chest, the triplets settling as if in recognition of their sire. The beta enforcer watched in stunned silence as the alpha turned toward the pack lands, his howl rising, not of command, but of triumph, laced with promise. Elara's wounds throbbed, a scar forming not just on flesh but in spirit, a mark of rebirth where barrenness yielded to bounty. As they crested the ridge, the wilds parting like a curtain drawn, the sun broke fully, bathing them in light that chased the shadows. Elara met Thorn's gaze one last time, a look of forged understanding passing between them. Love, impossible no longer, but destiny claimed. In the distance, the pack's howls answered, a chorus shifting from exclusion to welcome. The air lightened, carrying the scent of new growth amid the ruins, hope blooming from the melancholia like dawn after endless night. Mother, mate, queen, she had endured, and in that endurance the world remade itself, tender roots pushing through stone.